hold hands and close your eyes. It's midnight, and you're listening to the Ghost Story Guys. Welcome to the Ghost Story Guys. I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestel.
This is the show where we talk about spooks, specters, and all the other things watching us from the shadows beyond the campfire. Some conversations only make sense after the sun has set, and this is most definitely one. Thanks for tuning in. This is episode number 191, and we're coming to you from that tiny mountain cabin you dream about, but can never quite reach. Paul, my friend, how are you doing?
I'm coping okay. I'm not getting withdrawal symptoms so far, and we're into day 6 of the experiment.
The experiment being exactly how much football you can cram into your eyeballs in a 24-hour period?
Yes, it is now. Hang on. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, today. Game 19.
So you've watched 19 games of football in 6 days?
Yes.
That's impressive. That is a Bestelian level of dedication.
It is. There's only been a couple I've regretted. Sadly, both of them have involved England, but we have yet to lose, and therefore onwards.
That is, I think, the English motto. We have yet to lose, and so onwards.
So, yeah, other than that, I've just kind of tried to get out of the house occasionally and enjoy the fact that summer, as the solstice is upon us, summer has finally arrived in the United Kingdom.
Summer has arrived here too, and I wish it would leave. Paul, it is so very hot in my apartment. I have the windows closed because it cuts down an external noise. And I am dying, basically. As I mentioned to you, I am sitting here. I have 2 ice packs on my legs. It is about 34 degrees in my apartment. I do not have air conditioning, so I am making do. It is a challenge. I am not built for warm weather, and I have been spending most of my time at the co-working space where they have lots of air conditioning.
Yes, well, we may swap places next week. Because I know it's going to get even hotter here next week.
Inshallah, as the man says.
Yeah, and I can't open the window as my mum lives on the back of the busiest motorway in Britain. You may not be able to tell that I am literally 500 yards away from the M1.
No, I would never have guessed. It seems so placid there with your lovely curtains, which you will see if you watch our reels on Instagram or YouTube Shorts. Paul's mom's lovely decor.
Yes, they're probably older than some of our listeners, these curtains. They've been here since 1993. I had hair when we bought this house.
Talk about a different era. To imagine you with hair kind of upsets me.
There's a few pictures out there.
We'll see if we can't wangle one up for the show notes. A picture of Paul Bestel with hair. Not only am I excited to see a photograph of Paul with hair, which I'm still not 100% sure actually exists, time will tell, but I am also excited for tonight's show because it is another themed show, and it comes from an unexpected place. Similar to how listening to your conversation with Preston Dennett inspired me to put together episode 190, A Little Cosmic Terror, this episode was inspired by the new Russell Crowe horror flick, The Exorcism. We were invited to attend a press screening. And, I'm going to level with you. This is not The Exorcist, exactly. It's not even The Exorcist 3, or maybe Exorcist 2. Maybe Exorcist 2. It's not even, it's not even Deliver Us from Evil. But between this and The Pope's Exorcist, I am comfortable saying that I will never get tired of seeing thick Russell Crowe shouting at demons.
Get out.
Oh, it's so much better than that. No one hams it up like Mr. Crowe. I don't know. I saw him recently in a film called Land of Bad, where he is a drone operator, and he's just full on in Hawaiian shirt dad mode. And I am, I say this as I wear a Hawaiian shirt. I'm not unaware of this. But yeah, he just seems to be at that point in his career where he's got a nice big belly. He has no interest in doing anything about it, and he is just rolling with it. And I think that's a vibe we can all respect. But yes, so in this episode, inspired by The Exorcism, which is, of course, in theaters now, we will be telling stories of possession. Not by demons, really, because neither Paul or I really believe in Christian ideology, but we do believe there are things out there which do not exactly have our best interests at heart. Which is, of course, the paranormal is not all that. The supernatural is not all spooky and scary. Most of it is benign and completely outside your need to pay any attention to it. But there are stories which, well, sometimes scare the shit out of us. This is, hopefully, a collection of those.
Yes, I was beginning to ponder when you mentioned it, that we were going to be doing this, that I thought, have you once again timed something so I'm at my mum's and therefore near the site of Britain's most notorious exorcism?
Is it?
Yes.
Okay, well, hold that thought, because I will be asking you about that later, in addition to the original story that The Exorcist and The Exorcism, I believe, is partially based around, which is the original story of exorcism in Georgetown.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, we will have stories, not necessarily of exorcism, some of which will involve exorcism. In fact, actually, the last story we tell, we're going to be revisiting Bumblebuzz, which is possibly my favorite story from the back catalog of this show. If anything we've ever done in this show is a case for thick Russell Crowe, Paul, it is Bumblebuzz.
And Mr. Skin.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Skin. Okay, yeah, that's a tough one. Mr. Skin's up. Mr. Skin and Bumblebuzz. We'll just, like Godzilla versus Kong, we'll just have them go at it. No, fight. We'll have them fight. We're not, oof.
Yeah, I was wondering where we were going. I know it's hot, but I didn't realise it was affecting you that much.
Well, there's an image.
Man, you do a show in no pants, and the next thing we've got sexy demons.
Well, I wasn't going to tell the audience I wasn't wearing pants, but that is correct.
Or shorts.
I have those on at the very least.
Good. It's
not visible, but it would feel wrong talking to you if I wasn't wearing anything below. If I was just Donald Ducking it through this whole episode, that would be just wrong. It would just be wrong.
That's okay. I've got shorts on as well.
Okay. With that firmly established, we're going to thank our patrons.
This one's for the patrons.
Patrons, we could not do what we do without you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. That's right, folks. Everyone who downloads the Ghost Story Guys, you help make us who we are. But without our patrons, Apple Podcast, and YouTube subscribers, we simply could not make the show go. Ad revenue is really not that much, and it's deeply unreliable. We exist purely thanks to those fine folks. And while we'd like to thank all of them, we would especially like to thank our latest ones. They are
Caris Lowe,
Dom K,
Auntie,
Lorraine,
Dave Baxter,
and M. Powers. Guys, thank you so much. Again, we couldn't do this without you. Your support is deeply appreciated. And while we'll wait till the end of the show to tell you about all the cool stuff you get, we will say, patrons, YouTube, and Apple Podcast subscribers get ad-free feeds, and who doesn't want that? Ads suck. So if you want to support what we do here, head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. That's patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. Or sign up to GSG Premium via Apple Podcasts or YouTube. One last thing, shout out to our composer, Rainy Days for Ghosts. Rainy Days for Ghosts is a project of film journalist and composer Harper Smith. You can find more of Harper's work by heading to rainydaysforghosts.bandcamp.com or by searching for Rainy Days for Ghosts in your favorite music streaming platform. All right, Paul, we're going to speed dial thick Russell Crowe.
I've made worse calls in my life.
I believe it. We may find out he's hanging out with Shotgun Frank, so strap in. Bad trip. I did not grow up in a religious household. I never went to church, was not baptized, never really had any spirituality when growing up. I was always fascinated academically by the metaphysical and the supernatural. I didn't disbelieve, but I needed to experience something for myself in order to truly believe in the existence of the paranormal, because believing something based on faith was not a concept ingrained into me. About 6 or so years ago, I had gotten a hold of a decent quality of some really potent psychedelic mushrooms, and had been eating them with various friends all that summer and having a lot of fun doing it. Eventually, I was left with one bag, only enough for one more good trip for one person. Fast forward a year, and I hadn't found any opportunity or company with which to partake. I eventually heard a rumor that shrooms start to lose their potency the older they get. Since these were such good quality mushrooms, I became impatient to eat them, fearing they were now duds after waiting so long. At this point, I had been dating a member of the pagan community for a few years, which had reopened my fascination with the metaphysical and the paranormal. I decided that I would eat these mushrooms alone, and try to make it a spiritual experience, to further open myself to the divine. So I picked a nice sunny day that I had off from work. The only preparation I made was to have an empty stomach and a pen and a notebook. I thought I might try automatic writing as a means of communication with any entities I might encounter. I ate the boomers and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and sat in my living room. It was a warm, sunny day, and I kept the blinds closed to try and keep the apartment cool. In my tiny second-story apartment, I opened myself up to the mysterious and the supernatural, come what may. I think I may have made a declaration. I'm here, and I want to talk to anyone or anything that is willing, or something like that. Oh boy. I thought it, and projected that thought out into the universe. I think I even said it out loud. I think I expected an ancestor or a spirit animal or even a nice benevolent nature sprite of any variety come to bless me with some sort of serene and cathartic concord. It didn't occur to me that what was most likely to answer such an invitation would be malevolent. Paul, people never learn, do they?
Yes, you've got to be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, that just seems unwise. We'll talk about it afterwards, but that just seems like a real rookie mistake. I had made a mistake. Yes, you had. And I knew it almost as soon as the effects of the mushrooms started to kick in. At first, the high started normally, with a slightly elevated sense of consciousness and a pleasant and amusing feeling of serenity. As my pupils began to dilate, and the random points of light began to shine like stars, I felt this intrusive inhabitation suddenly, like an invasion, in my mind. Abruptly, there was something else inside of me, and I had flung the doors wide open and invited it in. I was immediately struck with sinister joy at the opportunity that just presented itself. I experienced a divergence of consciousness and emotion. It felt like I was experiencing the world both as myself, as I always have, and as something else. This other consciousness felt a nefarious excitement at its present circumstance, the feeling one gets when they are defiantly infiltrating a place they shouldn't be, like a naughty child enjoying disobedience for the sake of disobedience, like a trespasser. At the same time, I felt my own consciousness get pushed aside, locked away, restrained. This thing in my head took control of my body. I remember feeling a disjointed fascination at the sensation of my flexing muscles, the effect of gravity on my moving limbs, the way it felt to have the physical world wrapped around me and pressing in on me, as if I'd never noticed it before. A grin split my face to the point of discomfort, and that very sensation was an entertainment, simply to experience that small ache, and also for the petty satisfaction over the discomfort it was causing me. Because the real me was still very much experiencing everything, but powerless to change it, but I was utterly imprisoned in my own mind, and in this prison my jailer was torturing me, mentally scourging me with every shameful memory, every regret, every self-deprecation, mundane or substantial. It was dredging up childhood embarrassments that I didn't even remember and flinging them at me like stones. It was whipping me with every despicable thing I'd ever done, events I hadn't thought about in years. It was grinding my nose into every selfish choice I had made. Truly, it was torture. Meanwhile, this thing had taken the reins completely and moved about my home, contemptuously observing all the pieces and corners of my domicile. It was mocking the entirety of my life and what I found important. It observed the trinkets and knickknacks which I had decorated and found them hilarious for being incredibly insignificant. It saw the art on the walls and thought of them no differently than an ape's scratching in the dirt, and found that funny as well. It recalled my emotional attachments to these material possessions, these collections of shiny bits and colorful toys, and found them absurd, even hysterical. It viewed me like it was viewing a dog who collects bones and can't understand why, complacent in its unthinking urge to fulfill some instinct past which it cannot evolve. A monkey making a nest. Do monkeys make nests? Well, anyways. So incredibly primitive that it cannot even fathom how trifling it all is. It laughed at the thought. It laughed as it wandered about my apartment, giggled as it picked up and inspected my possessions. But it was not my laugh. This sound that was coming from my painfully gritting mouth was not the sound of my laughter. I had never made this awful noise in my life. A deep, sinister chuckle, almost comical, but for the intent. It was not my laugh. The thought stuck with me, even through the emotional flaying I was simultaneously experiencing. This thing was laughing at my life with my own body, laughing at me as it hurt me. Thankfully, after a few hours of enduring this torment, I started to slowly gain control of my faculties. My immediate desire was to be in the sun. I went out to the tiny balcony, blessedly in full sunlight, and I sat down on the wooden boards to be warmed by the rays, legs crossed right next where I had strategically placed the pen and notebook for the automatic writing. Absent-mindedly, I picked up the notebook and the pen. Already opened it to a clean page, I put the pen to the paper, closed my eyes against the heat of the sun, and allowed my hand to wander. The daylight was restorative, and I let its warmth calm me, using the lull in the misery and discord to clear my mind. All the while letting my hand scrawl randomly on the paper, never looking down upon what it was writing. Not long after going outside, the intensity of the trip started to diminish. As I came down physically from the high, I was left spiritually torn to shreds, and emotionally raw as an open wound. I had been sent tumbling down a metaphorical slope of anxiety and shame that afterwards became a constant obstacle, which I have had to struggle against, much more so than ever before. I don't know what happened to the paper I used for the automatic writing. I think I destroyed it, burned it most likely, as I had a notion that burning was cleansing back then. Burned it, out of revulsion and fear. I was under the influence of psychoactive drugs, yes, so I'll never feel completely certain that what I experienced was real, but on most days it is my opinion that I was actually possessed by a demon or some other malevolent entity, something not human in origin. Whatever it was, if it was real, it barely toyed with me, yet it left me profoundly shaken. And Paul, I gotta tell you, man, that sounds like a real bad time.
That's what the young people call a bad trip. Yes.
Yeah, you're not kidding. I actually found a story, it was just sort of like an anecdotal mention, but this dude took acid with his buddy, and it just sounds like his buddy had exactly that, a bad trip, because he started talking about entities and things, but he was just running around the house being nuts. And I just think, yeah, man, that just went bad. That'll happen.
Yes, that's why I would always recommend, if you are going to ingest psychedelics, don't do it on your own, especially if you're a newbie to that particular pastime.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, don't, folks, do not mess around with psychedelics. Always be respectful of them, because they have a lot of power to mess with you if you use them incorrectly. And yeah, if you're doing them alone, that can be a whole thing.
Even experienced people may occasionally have a bad situation where they essentially believe that they have a secret microfilm hidden in the skin of their arm, and they're being hunted by the Mexican government. And so they have to go on the run for 3 or 4 hours in a blizzard.
This sounds very specific, Paul.
I'm just sharing these kind of anecdotes that I've read about over the years. And so you have to be careful, despite how used you may be, that at any given time you may believe that you're on the run from the Mexican government who want to chop your arm off.
Paul, I feel like I'm sort of bound by the bro code to ask, are you on the run from the Mexican government who wants to chop your arm off? You can tell me. You nod, just blink twice.
Not anymore.
Okay, there we go. So yeah, that fascinating shit. Again, because of the presence of the psychedelics, obviously you can't really say one way or the other, because it can be a really profound experience. And I know that ego death is a big part of that, and kind of going through your sort of mental inventory and kind of tearing things down. Tearing things down is a bad way to put it. It sounds negative, but deconstructing a lot of the shit. So what he's experiencing doesn't sound, exactly outside that realm of possibility. But I will say, no matter what you're doing, the idea of saying like, come on in, whoever wants to come in, seems real fucking bad.
Especially when it comes to mushrooms. I've never heard the term boomers for mushrooms before, so that was a new one on me. We just call them shrooms here.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with boomers either.
And obviously the Peak District is a prime location, allegedly, for picking such psychotropic fungi. I've read about. And so these are things sometimes you have to be very careful with, because I think the thing with psychedelics is, and perhaps for a lot of hard drugs, I think you've got to be very, very careful, because what you think your tolerance level may be does not depend on that at all, because you've often no idea of the strength of things. And so taking some and thinking, hearing somebody think that shrooms lose their power over time, that, my friend, is a mistake, because I can guarantee you they don't. If anything, they become more potent, apparently. Something
Paul learned from them during his time in the Mexican government.
When I was living in a cave in the Peak District.
Is it correct that it's legal to grow them or pick them in the UK, but not consume them? Or I seem to recall you guys had like a weird kind of legal framework with specifically mushrooms.
I consider most laws weird in this country, so I work within a strange framework of most things, Brennan, so I'm not the right person to ask. I wouldn't care what the legal framework was regarding psychotropics.
Fair enough. Okay.
All I've got to know is, can I run faster than who's chasing me? And the answer is usually yes. Controlled. The house in New Orleans where I live was built in 1895, and it looks like something straight out of an Anne Rice novel. It has 2 large galleries that are punctuated by 8 large gallery windows, and is accentuated by traditional New Orleans wrought iron. I live in what used to be a double parlour at the bottom of the left side of the building, which is now divided into 15 individual apartment units. I moved in 2 weeks ago, and everything seemed fine and dandy until my little sister told me she felt a presence in the bathroom. I know she's sensitive to these things, so I believed her, and even expected activity. What happened within the next week still leaves me puzzled and distressed. The second night I was in my apartment, I was awakened at 3 a.m. to the sound of heavy feet shuffling in the hallway outside of my door. I listened intently as the footsteps slowly made their way from the back of the outside hallway, leading up to my front door. There, the footsteps stopped without leaving through the main door or going up the stairs. They simply disappeared. I was terrified and looked under my door, but nothing was there. I tried to fall back asleep, but I felt lightheaded, and I could feel something touching me and causing my hair to stand up. That was the first night I lost a good amount of sleep. A few nights later, my friend Annette came from out of town to pay a visit for the weekend, and the first night that she was there, I dreamed that there was a yellowish, opaque figure next to my bed. I awoke from that dream to hear distinct footsteps in my bedroom, only to wake up again to the actual sound of footsteps in the same place. I had never heard my neighbours upstairs, and I knew whatever it was coming from my apartment. Even after wrapping my brain around this, I was somehow miraculously able to fall back asleep. The next night was when things began to get very strange. According to Annette, I had fallen asleep around 1:30 a.m. and was snoring loudly for about 30 minutes when I got out of bed and left the apartment. She's an insomniac, so she only saw me leave out of the corner of her eye whilst playing on my computer. She'd assumed that I'd gone out to get something from my car, but when I didn't return after 10 minutes, she opened the window to see where I was. There, she saw me standing naked, just staring at the front of the house. Annette immediately ran outside to get me, only to have me stare at my front porch and ask, "What's this? Why don't I have access to this?" I was motioning to the double veranda, which according to one of my friends who worked on that house 5 years ago, was a post-Katrina renovation. I only just learned of this 2 nights ago. Annette did not know what to say to me, and ushered me back inside after collecting the clothes that I had ripped off whilst outside. Once I got back inside, I immediately walked to the bathroom and stayed in there for 30 minutes without making a sound. Annette said that I came back out and immediately went to my dresser where I started to explore its contents, holding up each piece for inspection. Whilst I was going through my things, I began to berate her, and when she asked if she'd done anything wrong, I told her not all things were about her, and told her that I knew the big picture. I called her selfish and demanded that she not say anything about this incident to me in the morning. I made her promise that she wouldn't say anything to myself and to others about me walking around in my house in nothing more than my birthday suit. After I was done berating her, I passed out on my bed and began snoring again. I have no recollection of this event, and Annette was truly distressed about it. She actually waited until the end of the next day to bring it up. I'm never mean to my friends, nor do I have a history of sleepwalking. My thoughts immediately went to possession, but I'm wary to diagnose the cause so soon. Since that incident, I've witnessed 2 orbs in my house. I've smelt a strong perfume scent in my bathroom where there are no vents, and I don't wear scents. And my 2 cats will randomly wail at dark rooms. I've not slept in a week, and am now at my wit's end. Just last night, I decided to acknowledge its existence, and even to offer it some libations. That seemed to cool the energy, but once again at 3 a.m, I was awakened to sounds in the hallway, followed by that light-headed, skin-raising feeling I get. I lost a lot of sleep, especially when the window rapping began. I looked, but I could find no source for such noise. I love this house, but I need my rest.
Sounds like a job for thick Russell Crowe.
Or Dr. Doobie.
I think that might be a similar problem to the last one. I think Dr. Doobie might be the wrong person to introduce to this particular situation.
You don't know until you try it.
That's true. That's a scientific method for you.
Definitely. Causation and effect. You just keep trying things until it stops.
I do think it's interesting that whatever was happening was really trying to keep it from her waking self.
Definitely. There is this train of thought, isn't there, when we're talking about these particular cases? It's almost as if these things have a limited time that they're able to do what they do. Like that last story, it seems about an hour was all that they could. And therefore, I think, obviously there's been thousands of studies done on some of the causes of sleep deprivation, and I remember watching a documentary about night terrors, which is probably one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen.
Is that the nightmare?
No, it was a documentary done over here in the UK.
Oh, really?
And they just wired people up and watched them, and to see some of the people, how they react in the night, it was terrifying. These people were screaming,
really?
standing up in their beds. They were full tilt, punching their pillows, screaming, just smashing the doors down. It was literally, if you didn't know what was going on, you could easily say, that person looks possessed.
Sure, yeah. I can't remember if I told you this story, but maybe almost 20 years ago now, a friend of mine, someone in his family was terminally ill with cancer. And he began to have night terrors, and he's an enormous man, like a very physically powerful man. It's a good thing he didn't live alone, but he didn't have anyone in his room at the time. But he would apparently wake up or get out of bed in this night terror, and I guess he must have been having some kind of nightmare or dream where he was trying to physically find the cure for cancer, and he was tearing apart his room. Apparently, it was a genuinely frightening sight. I think he's 6'6", this big tree trunk of a dude just ripping apart his room, breaking things, because his sleep clouded mind thought he could find the cure for cancer. Scary, scary shit, man. I cannot imagine.
Nightmares in general are bad enough, but night terrors are a completely different level of shock, I think. And for someone to witness that firsthand as a partner must be even more terrifying, because obviously you've got certain cliches as well. You never wake somebody up if they're sleepwalking, they'll die.
Of course, yeah. Or they'll kill you or something.
Which is absolute nonsense. If somebody's like that, just grab him, calm him down, just, hold them, choke them if you have to.
Citation needed on that one.
But,
make sure all your choking is consensual, folks.
Yeah. But these are the things, and I think, once again, sleep is a major part of people's lives. Most people spend a third of their day asleep. And yet, most people know next to nothing about how to get a great night's sleep. It's almost as if people are constantly chasing a great night's sleep. And yet, we don't study it properly. And it's remarkable in this day and age, with everything else that's going on about the quality of life and how people react to things, that still sleep is often pushed to the fringes of research, which I find ridiculous.
Although I will say, if the 80s were good for nothing, they were good for a bunch of movies about sleep research. if we were to believe 80s movies, sleep studies were the primary field of scientific endeavor during that time period.
Yes, especially by evil psychiatrists on the run.
Yeah, exactly. There was what? Night Wish, Brainstorm, Brain Scan. Yeah, there was a lot of sleep study movies. And in fact, there was one that was released, a Canadian one in 2020, I think, called Come True, that I really quite liked. The other ones I mentioned, you do not need to watch at all, but I would watch Come True, folks. That's a pretty solid little flick. And speaking of movies, of course, this episode themed as it is after the new thicc Russell Crowe, his official new name, flick, The Exorcism, directed by Joshua John Miller, who is, of course, the son of Jason Miller, who played Damien Karras in the original Exorcist film. And you are going to tell us a little bit about the original Georgetown case that The Exorcist was based on.
Well, to say this case is a mess would be an understatement.
Really?
So it was supposed to have occurred to a boy who lived with his family in the area of Rainier, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. But he didn't. He never lived there. He lived in a bungalow somewhere else. So already...
Oh. Okay. Wow. They really fucked this up.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Hang on. Let me check what the other place.
And also, it wasn't a boy. It was an ice cream sandwich. And he wasn't haunted.
It was just annoyed. So everything that you will probably read, unless you take a deep dive into this particular case, will say that he lived in Mount Rainier in Maryland. Not obviously up the mountain in the suburb known as Mount Rainier. That would make this story even stranger, to be fair. But he lived in, I think it was called Cottage City, which is in the same area, but it's a few miles away. It's not the same place. So straight away, we've already got a problem with this. Now, the official version is that this child began to suffer strange maladies, problems, self-harm, angry outbursts, and numerous other strange behaviours. Obviously, these days, most people would go, typical 14-year-old. But...
well, I didn't want to say, but yes.
In 1949, people thought, no, this child's possessed. And there began the origin story of what The Exorcist became. So obviously, Blatty clearly made some changes to the story because obviously when he wrote it, remarkably, it was still, still fresh in the public knowledge. It was widely reported in 1949 across America. And so Blatty, I think, wrote the book in 1971. He discovered the case, ironically, when he was at Georgetown University, which is where a lot of the Exorcist films, where a lot of the Exorcist scenes are filmed. The famous stairs are in Georgetown. For whatever reason, when they made the film, they set it exactly where they'd use the main city and town that this place was based upon, because Georgetown features quite heavily in this and it's known as the Georgetown case. And despite the fact it didn't happen in Georgetown or Mount Rainier, but all the scenes, a lot of the students there were used as extras in the films. There's some wonderful pictures of the staff and the pupils who took whilst filming was going on, and quite candid ones of people like Friedkin and Miller having conversations and Burstein and stuff. So it gives you an insight that we wouldn't normally see. So it seems as though Blatty had this story in his DNA. So I would imagine by the time he was there in the 60s, it was quite a well-known story because he was past all the newspaper reports. And then his first book was The Exorcist after leaving Georgetown University. So changing it from a boy to a girl and moving it around a bit, and obviously the book version is not the real version. However, the priests involved, and this is where stories begin, because there was supposed to be 12 priests involved. People have only ever been able to find 3. One priest who was involved wasn't even in the States at the time, apparently. And so some people have gone, well, there was one particularly interesting case, one particularly interesting version of this case where somebody said, well, I was there and I was involved in it, and he was just a brat showing off. Which I find peculiar because the family were not devoutly religious. They weren't the kind of people that went to church every day and every Sunday. They went fairly regularly, as quite a lot of post-war families did, but they weren't particularly pious. They were not people who would leap to the supernatural explanations of their child. And especially at that time, you would think, there's a lot of kids, it's the cusp of the 50s, delinquency was on the rise, wild teenagers, next things that'd be picking up guitars and making music and drinking coffee all day and singing songs about Shake, Shaky Baby and all that kind of stuff. But no. So I find it hard how they leapt from this kid allegedly being a bully and misbehaving and throwing tantrums to going, No, he's not just a naughty boy. He's actually possessed. And so from that point on, the story obviously deviates depending on which version it is. And essentially, it was resolved fairly quickly after he was exorcised several times. But the allegations about the priests involved making it up for self-publicity and promotion has never really gone away if you look for it. It's always been there, and it's been there pretty early on. Sort of, I think the 1960s, people were already beginning to cast aspersions on the official version. And it seems to me that a lot of people only view the history of the Georgetown incident from the Exorcist book and then the film, and simply change Regan for a boy and the location, they move it to a slightly different house. But to them, the facts are there, but they're not.
As so often happens when you have a film version of a real event, people they just assume what they're seeing on film is really what happened.
Yes, obviously. I mean, Blatty did change a lot in the book as well, you know?
Right.
And was fortunate enough, he was able to write the screenplay based on his own book, which is very different. If you look at the screenplay and the film version of his book, there are a great deal of similarities, but there are a lot of differences as well. And I think because as we are prone to tut and scoff at these days when we see the words based on a true story, which is like, is it really other than somebody's name? I mean, like the Dharma documentary that was docu-series that was on Netflix last year took so many liberties with that particular story. And I am often perplexed by things like that, because you do not need to exaggerate just how strange a bastard Jeffrey Dahmer was. So to start creating additional backstories and all this for a man that kept pickled penises and body parts in acid-filled drums in his own bedroom, where he used to drug people and make them watch, ironically, The Exorcist, or The Exorcist 2, over and over and over. I mean, you don't need to make things up about this man. He was it's a bloody weird story enough as it is. We don't need magic stories about potential human sandwiches being handed out to people that never happened.
Yeah, and I think that's when when the thing we do where we create lore becomes a problem, because you're creating lore for something that people treat it like it's just a story.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got more prevalent in the modern era. There are hundreds of films from the 30s, 40s and 50s that give a very different interpretation of certain historical events, shall we say?
Yes.
I.e. most of American Westerns up until about 1965 were a very, very different version of what went on. But it's the same for every country. I'm not just picking on American Westerns. We have some very strange interpretations of history on film here, and I'm sure many other countries do as well. As with a lot of things, people don't want to know the origin story. They like the film story better. And you can say that about a lot of things in these days, as anybody who's a fan of the Warrens will know. The difference between truth and reality is a very strange thing, often, shall we say.
Yeah, and I will say, as much as I like some of the Conjuring universe films, I like The Nun, I like the first Conjuring film, but I think one of the worst things all those films have done is to sort of allow Ed and Lorraine Warren to become protagonists, even though it's a fictional version of them, because like we said, that kind of gets transferred and papered over the real life version. That really bothers me.
Just think, in 70 years' time, somebody might be doing a cinematic version of Zach Baggins that makes him look like he's like kicking indoors and saving people.
Well, Paul, if that happens, we'll know for sure. There is no God, there is no devil. Well, devil maybe. Maybe the devil's real. All right. Well, since we're talking about horror movies on this episode, I've found, for not this segment, but for the next couple, I found some recorded incidents of alleged haunting on or around film sets. And of course, if you want to know about stuff like The Exorcist and the alleged haunted activity that happened there, you can watch a series like Cursed Films on Shudder. But the two examples I found, I don't think have gotten a lot of attention outside of very narrow fields. They're more modern films. And so we'll be sharing some of those examples as we move forward here. Also, I forgot to mention this at the top, but I want to shout out Brody Daniels. Brody is our new research intern. Brody really was a huge help in finding the stories for this episode and for what will probably be the next episode, The Haunting of Italy. So welcome to Brody, and thank you for all your help. Rehab. For a large part of my career, I worked in a rehab center. There I had many encounters and vivid experiences, both bad and good. This one actually happened in my final days there, and it was physical. Since I'm a medium, I got to experience one of the worst experiences of my life, being possessed by some kind of entity. It was one of those regular calm days at the center. The girls were behaving very well and everything was extremely peaceful until we received the news that 30 new girls were to come transferred from another center that night. All the chaperones and supervisors, including me, had to run and get things set to receive the new inmates. When they arrived, we divided them into the houses, and 10 of them stayed at the house I used to watch over. Unsurprisingly, these girls were rebellious, yelled a lot, and did not want to be there, but there was nothing they could do. After 5 p.m., we closed the doors and everyone was in the living room watching TV. I started to feel an agonizing sensation and constantly heard a voice inside my head saying, "Pray, pray." I felt like there was something wrong, and a very negative feeling started to come over me. I couldn't get rid of this feeling, even though I continued to do my regular tasks in the house. One of my colleagues stayed for the night to help with the extra girls, and close to midnight we checked if all the girls were asleep and started to get set for the night. I remembered I started feeling extremely sad, suddenly, and felt the urge to cry in despair. I have the habit of praying every night, and every time I started praying, the sadness would take over me and I would have to stop. I then took my Bible, which I kept by the bed, and tried to read it, but for some reason I couldn't understand the words. So I had to stop and start over, only to realize I still didn't understand a word. So I looked at my colleague, said, "There's something wrong with me," and I lay down on the bed. Suddenly, I felt like something was pushing me against the bed, and the agonizing feeling just got worse with time. By then, I realized I was having a spiritual struggle, and I knew something was trying to possess me, and I was running out of strength. I tried to get up, but whatever was there was pushing me down against the bed. Then the top part of my body was being lifted, and I was being shaken with a strength I cannot describe. I couldn't speak. I couldn't scream. I tried to move my body, but I couldn't. I was trapped inside myself, making rough movements up and down. I remember the only thing I could say to my colleague, who watched me in terror, was, "Go call Andy." Andy is the night manager and a very religious man, so at that time he was the only reference I had. After my colleague left, I blacked out. The next events were told to me by my colleague because I don't have any memory of what happened. I was laying on the bed, shaking my body up and down violently, when Andy came in the room and started talking to me, or whatever was inside of me. He said, "You have to leave her body. You are not allowed to be inside her. She is not ready to work." And the entity, or whatever it was, said, "I will leave when I want to." Andy asked, "Who are you?" I supposedly said, "Nobody you know of." So I got up from the bed and started walking, my body roughly shaking as I did. And as I was walking, I shouted, "I don't want to be here. This is not my place. I don't belong here. I belong in the streets." So I went up the stairs and Andy caught me and sat me down on the chair. I couldn't sleep at all until dawn, and when I finally came to, I felt like I'd been beat up or something. It was definitely a terrifying experience for me because I was physically harmed. I was violated. I was possessed. And just before we start talking about that, we should probably mention that, guys, if you do start to hear voices or feel like you're not in control of yourself, please seek mental health care. Before you start worrying about extra dimensional things like this, make sure you check with a licensed practitioner who can assess that you're not experiencing a physical psychological symptom.
Absolutely. When I spoke with the Reverend Alison Dunlop Shanes the other week, who's done several exorcisms and continues to practice them as we speak, she will always work in conjunction with a psychiatric evaluator of either a nurse or a doctor or a mental health professional to work in tandem and often deal with the situation. Because I think the other aspect of this as well is that often people will dismiss anything of this ilk purely as mental illness as well. Whereas in Alison's experience, sometimes there can be one or more things at play, and therefore you have to deal with everything individually to deal with the person as a whole.
Yeah, a friend of mine, I've mentioned them before, but they work in a mental health facility, and they work nights. And there was one story I shared on here before where this person, they were approached by someone in a sort of a consultative capacity, and this person had been experiencing severe depression ever since they moved into their dream house. They built this dream house on a parcel of land. Everything should have been perfect. And this person had this incredible melancholy. And my friend can see entities, can see these things that most of us only feel. And they saw that there was something hanging off this person, and they just instinctively knew that it had come from this parcel of land where they built the house. But they couldn't say anything because that is not the field that's not their job. The job is, hey, okay, you're going to go see this doctor. We're going to put you on this medication. You can't say, oh, well, also you built your house on the property of something that does not want company,
Yes.
And they were telling me a while back, they were working the night shift in a separate facility, and they watched on the camera feed a kind of light move from one locked room to another. And on each camera, they saw the patient react to it. So in each room this light moved to, the patient reacted to it. So it wasn't an artifact of the camera lens. It was an independent, moving thing, which appeared to have some kind of intelligence because it was going through walls. It wasn't a ghost or anything. It was legitimately like almost like an orb or a light. But everywhere it went, it was visible to the people in those places, and they were not happy to see it. And after it moved through the final room, it was gone. They didn't see it again.
How strange.
And of course, the person in the story doesn't have any memory of what happened. And so I thought this would be a good time to share one of the movie stories I talked about before. Now, folks, typically, if you hear an actor say while doing the press rounds for a horror movie that weird shit happened on set, you can ignore them. You can just ignore them. They're just doing their job. They're not lying exactly. They're like I remember years ago, I read one of Tim Allen's books. Might have been anyways. I read Tim Allen's autobiography like when I was a kid. And he said there was a type of lying when he was a kid. It was called bullshitting. So if your granddad tells you he used to leg wrestle Mussolini, he's not lying. He's bullshitting. And when those actors are doing press tours, they're bullshitting. They got a movie to sell. Because you don't see someone doing a rom-com and saying, man, shit got real weird backstage. It just doesn't happen.
No, they usually try and pretend that Jennifer Aniston is in love with her co-star.
Yeah, exactly. So most of the time I ignore that shit. However, I came across this interview years ago. It was with the director Scott Derrickson, who directed Deliver Us from Evil. And I mentioned that in the intro. And Deliver Us from Evil, I actually quite like it. It was, I think, kind of middlingly reviewed at the time, but I enjoyed it. And there is an exorcism scene in it. And this is something that Derrickson said in a 2015 interview with the Movie Crypt podcast. I'm just going to read the quote directly here. Derrickson says, the most amazing performance in that movie is Sean Harris, who plays the possessed guy. They put on like 300 prosthetics to put those cuts on his body every night. So he's sleep deprived and everything. He was fearless. I don't think I've ever talked about this in public before. We were shooting the scene where the stigmata begins, in the exorcism in the interrogation room. There's a close-up shot where he's looking straight in the camera. He looks like he's possessed. He looks like an alien. He's like, Sean has left the building. It's really scary. And after we did that, he was acting so strangely and not talking. And he started right after that take, by the way. Right after that take, he started retching. I yelled, cut, and he started retching, and the other actors walked off the set, and they were just like, get water for Sean. And then he was acting very odd. It was so intense. That was toward the end of the night. And then we wrapped, and I was like, I knew that it was great. I knew it was going to work really well. And then the visual effects guys, makeup effects guys, came and got me. They were just like, you got to come see Sean. Something is wrong with Sean. So I go see Sean, and he's out of his fucking mind. Like he was speaking in tongues, like he was gone, muttering this gibberish and everything. And it was really scaring all the other guys. And I knew he'd been up for many, many hours and was sleep deprived. So I just said, get everything off him as quick as you can. And I made 2 guys drive him home and walk him to his apartment. I said, don't leave his apartment until you see he's asleep in bed. And then the next morning when he came in, I was like, that was some incredible shit last night. He's like, yeah, I don't remember anything that happened. He said, I remember starting the stigmata scene. I remember like an expansion and then a pop. And that's all I remember. And well, I'm sure that's probably just sleep deprivation. It is It's an unusual thing. Have you seen his performance in Deliver Us from Evil, Paul?
Yes, I have. It's very frightening.
Yeah, that guy can really turn it on. And again, if you told me he had a little extra kick in those scenes, I would absolutely believe you.
Well, who's to say that former thespians now living in the other world may not just pop in occasionally just to give another performance for us?
That's fucked up. Actor ghosts who are so self-possessed are willing to invade someone else's body to put on a final performance. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'd believe they'd do it. I've met actors. But Jesus. You thought I was dead. Oh, Christ. We thought we were ready, is what we thought. Oliver Reed sitting up like a zombie, just making for the nearest bottle of booze.
Anybody want to fight? That's not Mom. At the time all of this happened, I must have been about 9 years old. I was in bed one night and heard the radio in the kitchen going. My mum would almost always work the 11 p.m. till 7 a.m. shift, but on Tuesdays, she'd take the mid shift because we would have family night on a Wednesday. I assume it must have been a Tuesday when this happened because my mum was in fact home. She worked a lot, and I mean 22 days out of the month most months, so it was not uncommon for us to try and help when she was up late cleaning. As I walked down the stairs, I noticed that all the lights in the house were off, and just the kitchen light was on, alone. This already had me running for the kitchen because our walls were a deep green. As I mentioned before, my mum worked those late shifts, and Dad purposefully painted the living room area a dark colour so that when the lights were out and the blackout curtains were closed, it would be dark enough for my mum to try and fall asleep after work. As I entered the kitchen, my mum was at the sink. When I thought about it afterward, I only heard the radio going downstairs, but not the sink as she was washing dishes when I walked in. Her back was turned to me, so I couldn't see her face, and I asked, "Mum, do you need some help cleaning?" But she didn't answer me. I asked a second time with a bit of moaning as an answer. This did not immediately alarm me because it did not sound like zombie moaning. More like a, I don't know kind of moan, if that makes sense. I just replied, "Okay, if you want me to help, just let me know." She didn't turn around, but kind of stiffened a bit, so I took it as my cue to get out and let her be. Sometimes she just wanted to clean in peace as she worked with older people, and many would die on her watch. My mum's a dedicated nurse when it comes to her patients because she worked in a rehabilitation centre. Many of these patients would get dropped off by their families and never literally see them again. She would often take us to see them when she could, so they could feel like someone cared for them. So, still no alarms went off as I walked back towards the stairs as I assumed someone must have died, and my mum was sad and she just wanted to be left alone. When I hit the corner to go round and up the stairs, everything in the kitchen shut off at once. The radio, the sink, the lights, all of it. Gone. My boy, when I tell you I ran up those stairs to my room, I was gone. I zoomed past my brother's and parents' room and ran into mine. I slammed the door shut and jumped under my covers. I was thinking this is the fucking end. My parents are big horror fans and didn't believe in shielding us from stuff like that because they wanted to understand the difference in what was real and what was not. And no matter what, God is there and will protect us. I tell you now, I did not feel God that night. I suddenly hear my room door bust open and my mum yells at me for running up the stairs thinking I'd gone and grabbed some candy or something and ran up like that to avoid her. I said, "No, Mum, you scared me. You turned everything off." And she was like, "What? What are you talking about?" So I tell her what just happened. She just tells me I must have dreamt it up and quickly tucks me in and closes my door. The next day I asked her why she'd do that to me when she knows I'm scared of the dark. I truly thought she was just being funny to me when she saw how scared I was or something and tucked me in to calm me down. She then tells me that she was in her room. She'd gotten home, took off her shoes and went straight to bed. She was never in that kitchen. She never heard me go down the stairs, but instead assumed my brothers had let me downstairs because I fell asleep as they used to do it, knowing I was scared of the dark and thought it was funny. When I ask her about it now, she only vaguely remembers this happening. My brothers had bad experiences in this house and believed me. Common factor I find in our stories that they all had to do with the downstairs. Nothing scary ever happened upstairs, but we all generally agree something was weird about the kitchen and that fireplace. Our stories always seem to include one or both of those two things. I still do not know to this day who or what I spoke to. Ooh.
Yep, mimic shit is probably some of the worst thing we covered on this show.
Yes.
Even on Luke's episodes over on Luke Lore, whenever mimics come up, it's just a holy terror. Or an unholy terror, I guess, as the case may be.
Who knows how to trick them is to ask them if they require help for domestic chores.
If you learn nothing else from this episode of Ghost Story Guys, you've learned that.
Are you unsure who is in your house? Ask them, do they need help washing up or doing the vacuuming? This will show you if they are a real person or not.
I don't know, if they're in my family, they're going to say no out of Catholic guilt.
Yes, it's also one of the reasons I refuse to let anybody ever wash up in my house apart from me.
Interesting. Okay, well, I'll take it. I'm coming over. I hate doing this.
You can dry up, you can put them away, but don't you dare put your hands in my soapy suds.
That's the English version of don't tread on me. Don't dare stick your hands in my soapy suds. So you were saying after we recorded the first segment, you kind of think the Georgetown case is bullshit.
I don't think it's anywhere near as strange as people have made out. Without going all the way back to the primary source, I think if you read anything after the 50s, I think you're in trouble.
But you mentioned another case, an English case. Can you talk a little bit about that?
The Exorcism of Michael Taylor.
Yes, please, please do.
So, Michael Taylor was a man who was clearly on the verge of a schizophrenic breakdown, but had found himself aligning with a religious offshoot of the Church of England here in Barnsley, in the north of England, in the early 1970s. And so Michael had begun attending services and Bible readings and talking about things, and had started to display some rather unusual behaviours towards other members of the congregation and the church leaders in that particular denomination, and which saw him physically attack two members of the congregation, as he believed that they had evil in them. And so he began to start acting very erratically. And once again, rather than seek medical support, obviously, to be fair, 50 years ago in the United Kingdom, medical support would usually be pull yourself together and have a stiff drink. That would usually be the mental health advice you would get from your doctor at that time, or they would tell you to get over it.
I was going to say, yeah, they just call you a sissy and hit you with a rolled up newspaper.
Here's a prescription for 20 cigarettes.
Smoke them all at once.
Yes, that'll sort you. This was a ticking time bomb. And so Michael was subjected to a 15-hour exorcism. He went through the night.
Oh, Jesus.
In October 1974. And they claimed that they pulled 30 or 40 demons out of him. And once the service was done, they sent him on his way. Now, one of the strange things about this particular case, which often makes me scratch my head and think, did someone know about this? Is the fact that the priest involved in this case is known as Peter Vincent. Peter Vincent is, of course, the coward who pretends to be a vampire hunter in Fright Night.
Oh.
And I'm one of those things that I think sometimes there is too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence. I find it very odd, because Peter Vincent isn't a common name. And yes, people might have just made that up, but I find it very odd that the hero, or one of the heroes in a horror film made 10 years after this particular incident, one of the key characters in it is shown to be a man completely out of his depth. And his name is Peter Vincent. So that's a very strange thing. However, that is not the saddest part of all this, because obviously Michael was sent home to his wife, and then a few days later, the police find him wandering the streets of his village, just outside of Wakefield, just over the border in West Yorkshire from where we are, and he's covered in blood, but it's not his blood. And so they go home and find his wife and dog had both been attacked physically horrifically. I'm not going to describe what happened. Even I find it hard to read about it often. It's because, especially now, I know what's coming. And it's incredible. He was sent to prison under a mental health order and served 3 years in prison and was released into the general public in 1979. And even on a scale of things that have happened and terrible things, for him to have murdered his wife and the dog and only serve 3 years in a high security prison before being released. When I look back at that case, it's just so many issues with it, from the incorrect religious interventions when he clearly needed psychiatric help, the refusal to follow up on it, the fact that he was obviously so ill that he didn't see a problem in wandering around his own neighbourhood naked, covered in blood in the day as well. This wasn't at night. And then for him to serve so little. I mean, ironically, I think Taylor's one of those cases that you've got to really search hard for his life afterwards. But he is a convicted sex offender now.
Oh, yikes.
And he's still living in the same area. The last time he appeared in the news was when he was released from prison last time, because he actually got a longer sentence for his offences now than he did for when he murdered his wife in the 70s. So that incident happened in October 1974 in Gorber, which is a village outside of Barnsley. And yes, you will often hear people... I once heard one of the worst episodes of any podcast I've ever had the misfortune of listening to. I don't know what it was called, but it featured two very annoying people who just shouted at each other.
I think that's about 78% of podcasts, if I'm honest.
Okay, bro, step back.
Not ours. Ours are great. It's the other guys. It's the children who are wrong.
And they basically just told this story in all its gory details and made most of it up, and then claimed nobody knows where he is, which is absolute bullshit. It's one of those things that happens in all forms of the paranormal now, that the majority of stories that people perpetuate, like Winchester's, Amityville, the Warrens, the Michael Taylor exorcism, people go, ugh. And sadly, some people just go, oh, well, wow, that's amazing. Whereas I go, the fuck are you talking about, you fucking idiots? That's not true.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things that you've got to, even shows I really, really love. I remember going to see Richard McLean Smith when he did his live tour, when he released his book Unexplained many years ago. And he did a presentation on the Hexham Heads, and the ending really confused me because I didn't think that's how it ended. And so I asked, is that what happened? And he went, no. That's not what happened. But it just gives it gravitas. And he explained it and we talked about it and it was fine. But you've got to remember that. But that particular episode, it just infuriated me primarily because I grew up with this story and it wasn't talked about. People didn't talk about it. I knew about it when I was about, I don't know, I think after I'd watched The Exorcist. And my mum said, well, that happened around here. I was like, what? What? The Exorcist set in Barnsley? What are you on about, Mum? I know it's strange out there on a night, but... And so that's when I learned about it, when I was probably about, I don't know, I think I saw The Exorcist on a pirate video when I was about 11, I think.
Oh, right, because The Exorcist was a video nasty.
It was banned.
Yeah. You guys, was it finally 2000 you guys finally got it?
1999.
There we go.
I went to the cinema to see it, and I was sat behind a man who was clearly allergic to both soap and deodorant. It added to the ambience of death in the film, I thought.
I was sitting next to one of those guys at the coffee shop today, so real good times. And this is a particular system of weather where those failings are really, really made obvious. And if anyone is near you, you will suffer. And I suffered.
Yes. I don't think Febreze need to do nose-blind adverts. I think deodorant companies start to do it because I cannot fathom that if you smell so much that the person behind you's eyes start to water and they've got this dry kind of, oh my God, I've got to be sick kind of reaction, that nobody else can smell that, because I find that very... I know I've got a larger nose than most, but still, I'm not a sniffer dog.
No. I tell you, man, if I ever become a millionaire, I'm going to have SEAL Team 6 on standby. And whenever one of these smelly sons of bitches enters my personal space, I'm going to hit a button. They're going to zip line in and just beat him with sticks of solid deodorant. That's what I'm going to have done. What
you should do is, when you see, you should go, shower the bastard. And just go, and hose him down and rub him up with some Dove.
I don't want to pay anyone to rub anyone else up. I feel like I understand I understand there's a point to this particular rubbing up. Don't even like saying it.
You'll not be watching Pixar's new film Rubbing Up then.
I didn't say that. So as I mentioned, we are going to, for our final story, be retelling the tale of Bumblebuzz. I do not know which episode that is from. I just know it is from the either 2019 or 2018. It was called The Curious Case of Bumblebuzz. And this is an anonymous listener account. Before Paul and I take turns telling the story of Bumblebuzz, I thought I would share this other story of something strange happening on the set of a film. The film is The Innkeepers, which is a fun haunted hotel story directed by Ty West. I believe it came out in 2011. The film was shot at the Yankee Peddler Inn in Torrington, Connecticut. And what's interesting is the hotel itself has a long history of haunting. And that's not something that West and his crew knew about because they actually first stayed there when they were shooting his film House of the Devil a couple years prior. And so I have found a few quotes where Ty West kind of talks a little bit about what they experienced in the Yankee Peddler Inn that led them to shooting The Innkeepers there. So these quotes come from a 2010 profile with Interview magazine. The quote says, 2 years ago, his producers originally booked rooms at the Yankee Peddler for West and his crew for the production of The House of the Devil, shot several miles away. They told us, we found a hotel, it's reasonably priced and pretty cool, says West. But when I checked in, having known nothing about it, I immediately thought, this fucking place is weird. I remember everyone in the crew being surprised, too, rolling their eyes. West laughs. They thought we were staying at like a Best Western, because that's usually what it's like, and it tends to suck. A lot of us generally felt the hotel was creepy. After a few nights, I started talking with the staff here, and that's when I heard about the ghost stories. I don't believe in ghosts, but weird shit did happen. Since we've returned, and of course he means to shoot The Innkeepers, lights have turned off and on by themselves in my room, my phone rang and no one was on the line, which the hotel staff says happens all the time. There are nights where I wake up in my room and it feels like somebody is in there. The author says they tease West and they say, well, this must make for kooky press. And West replies, yeah, but when I'm on other movies or I'm at home, it's never like this. Then again, I'm working 12-hour days, so it's hard to say. Ask around, though. Almost everyone in the cast and crew is having really fucked up nightmares and vivid dreams. And then 2 years later, in an interview with IndieWire, West goes on to say, well, I'm a skeptic, so I don't really buy it. But I've definitely seen doors close by themselves. I've seen a TV turn off and on by itself. Lights would always burn out in my room. Everyone on the crew had vivid dreams every night, which is really strange. West goes on to say, the one story that is the most intriguing to me, in the film, the most haunted room is the honeymoon suite. That's where the ghost stuff started in the hotel. The only reason I picked the room that I picked to shoot in was because it was big enough to do a dolly shot. No more thought went into it other than pure technical reasons. So, when we were finishing the movie, I found out that the most haunted room in real life is the room I picked to be the haunted room in the movie. It could be a coincidence. It's just weird it happened that way. And I think that's a cool balance of healthy skepticism, but also admitting that, hey, it feels like something weird happened here. I just don't know how to classify it.
Yeah, very much so. And it's, like you said earlier, it's one of those cliches these days that if anybody's doing a horror film or whatever, I think they've clearly learnt a lot from, as we mentioned earlier, The Exorcist and all the stories that surrounded that. If I see another article ever on the internet that says, did you know they use real skeletons in the pool scene in Poltergeist? I'm going to climb inside my screen, right? And I'm going to find where that person is who's written that article, and I'm going to beat them to death with a skeleton.
You heard it here, folks.
Fun fact, all films ever made up until about 2000 use real skeletons. Any film you've ever seen made in the 20th century that has a skeleton in it, that will be a real skeleton. They were all real skeletons. All the skulls and everything, they're all real. They're real skeletons. They're cheap. They're really cheap.
There's an alarming thought. Your mortal remains are cheap.
You know, so they make out that, like, Poltergeist is part of the reason it was cursed. Oh, it's because they use real skeletons. Every film ever prior to that uses a skeleton in it. And every film, I would imagine, made for 20 years after it had a skeleton in it because they're real skeletons and they're really easy to get hold of. Again,
this is why I'm always just dismissive when horror movies, especially when they're coming out, will say, oh, well, you know. because 9 times out of 10, it's bollocks. It's a way to sell tickets. And again, I don't fault them for it. That's just the nature of the business. But you don't have to pay any attention to it. And especially with something like Poltergeist. I mean, again, there are so many famously haunted film sets. Like when I was looking around, the number of articles that referred to Poltergeist, The Exorcist, The Omen, just shit that was mostly from the 70s and early 80s when everyone was really worried about Satan. It's silly, and it's not really worth paying, again, all that much attention to. I don't know why Satan would be particularly interested in one film more than another, unless Satan's like got a really keen sense of his career and he doesn't want to be in a stinker.
Well, if you think that, surely he'd have burnt the set of Legend down, despite him being probably the best cinema version of Satan ever put to film, I would suggest.
I figured with Legend, Satan knew where Tom Cruise was going to go, so he took that L for the team.
It's up there with De Niro in Angel Heart. Tim Curry and De Niro are probably my two favourite interpretations of Satan. I mean, Angel Heart's a bit like, unless you're an idiot, you will probably work out what this man's name is.
My name's Lou Cypher. All right, you're the devil. No, what? Who told you that?
Anybody that can peel an egg like that without banging it, definitely Satan.
Your business card says your name is Mr. Satan? You're the devil. You're the actual, literal Christian devil. Puff smoke, you know.
It's like Gregory Peck when he says, I'm sick to death of people saying that The Omen was a cursed film because the plane I was on got struck by lightning. We survived. If anything, it's a lucky film. No,
that's it. These legends kind of build up around stuff and they get repeated. And again, you know, in a world where you need to constantly be producing content for the algorithm monster, which I think is probably the closest we have come to a true representation of Satan on this earth, the algorithm, just generally the concept of algorithms, or at least as they apply to the internet. I can forgive you for writing this nonsense, but it's hard to kind of dig through the noise and find the signal. Like there's actually another story, and I wasn't able to get the podcast transcribed in time to find the story for the show, but the director Darren Bousman has talked again on the Movie Crypt about when he shot the film 11/11/11, which is not a great film, but they shot it in Spain, and he was saying that the house they used for the film, there were some things that happened there which led him to believe there was actually something going on. And he was not on a press tour for 11/11/11 at the time. He does these epic interviews with the Movie Crypt podcast, at least he used to. And I wish I'd been able to find it because it's a fun little tidbit. But this shit happens, right? Because you're gonna there's that asylum near Coquitlam, the old Riverview Asylum, where a lot of shit is shot. And I've got a friend who used to work on film crews there, and she told me, she said that place is 100% haunted. You know, there are things that happen there that just don't happen anywhere else. And whether you're shooting The X-Files or whether you're shooting, you know, there was a little scene show called Human Target that my friend worked on. Whatever you're shooting there, just weird shit just happens. And again, it's the stuff people talk about less that I always find interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I don't ever want to hear anything about The Exorcist, Poltergeist, or The Omen being cursed ever again, and especially Poltergeist, because people perpetuate this nonsense about the two female stars and the tragic circumstances. At the end of the day, one of them was murdered by an abusive partner. Dressing it up as some kind of curse is disrespectful to her family, and other members and other people that have suffered domestic violence. To try and perpetuate it as though it's some kind of... It's almost like they're trying to give this arsehole a get out that, it was cursed because they use real skeletons, as though it's almost it was going to happen. Oh, what did they expect? And you know, you're talking about somebody whose brother is renowned for being in one of the greatest horror films ever made, and built a very stellar career, and still does it these days. And he must get sick of talking about his sister's murder 40 odd years ago.
Who's her brother?
Griffin Dunn.
Oh, I had no idea they were related.
Monique was his sister. Monique was his sister.
I'll be goddamned. I did not know they were related. Griffin Dunn, folks. I really know him from Martin Scorsese's After Hours, but he's done a lot of great stuff.
Absolutely. Tons of stuff in the 80s. And obviously he was unfortunately eaten by a werewolf. Spoiler alert. In American Werewolf in London.
Happens to the best of us.
Yeah, well, you stray off that path. You've only got yourself to blame.
Just before, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back with the story of Bumblebuzz. But Paul, one of our listeners, I'm sorry, I can't remember who, in the Facebook group, because you and I had talked about the film 13 Ghosts. They posted a screen or the cover of a film called 13 Erotic Ghosts, featuring Julie Strain, who was a model and star of many, we'll say softcore 90s type sexy action intrigue movies. And they made a joke that, oh, have you guys seen this? And I had not. But because I am unable to help myself, I went and found a copy and I watched it. But there may not have been any skeletons in that film, Paul, but there's a lot of boning, if you get my drift.
Well, I am aware of the incredibly well-lauded adult film Pirates, which apparently changed the pornography landscape when it came out nearly 20 years ago, I believe. That has ghosts and skeletons in it. Sort of as full stops between various people's clothes falling off.
Well, yeah, that was like 13 Erotic Ghosts. It was basically just like 3 to 5 minutes of softcore pornography interspersed with what I will generously refer to as moments of community theater.
Yes, Pirates isn't softcore.
Oh, I see. Okay. Look at me. I'm the top now. All right. With that very timely and still relevant joke, we're going to take a quick ad break and we'll be right back with The Curious Case of Bumblebuzz. Our final story for tonight, as I mentioned, is The Curious Case of Bumblebuzz, originally featured on this show a long time ago, really. Very close to the beginning, although I cannot remember when, and I refuse to look it up. I'm a mom of 3, an educator, and really tied to the community I live in. I've told other moms this story, but only a few of my work colleagues. After you hear it, it won't be much of a stretch to see why I wouldn't want my students' families to know this. Ever since my second, a boy, was born, he took more work than his sister. A smiling, blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy, born the last day of the year of the dragon right at 3:33 a.m., which the nurses were too spooked to write, so they marked 3:35. His extra care started when he was just 3 months old and caught norovirus. It took a year of healing for those fragile intestines to recover. And then there were the tantrums, starting about 18 months. Epic tantrums. I'd actually sought out his pediatrician's help, and by the time his baby sister was born when he was 2, I had mentioned it enough that his doctor suggested he may need a psych eval. You see, when he threw a tantrum, he always cried that Bumblebuzz was pinching him. I was a teacher, special ed actually, so I knew a thing or two, and had already enrolled him in preschool for a mild speech issue. So I told his teacher, per the doctor's request, to see if she thought he needed a psych eval. I laughed when I told her this, saying I had replied to the doctor that maybe he was psychotic, or maybe he was seeing ghosts, and she went serious fast. She looked straight in my eyes and said, "He's not psychotic. He won't stop telling us there's an old witch in the corner of the playground, and an owl on the fence that none of us see." Now, stop for a moment. He's 2, with a speech impediment, and yet they, a team of 3 women, had heard and understood this from him because it happened every day. I've been a kid, and I hated the shadows a lace curtain made, or the creepy black of a closet left ajar at night, so I know how our eyes can play tricks on us to feel deep terror. And I'm a teacher, so I know how kids can misinterpret all the time. But that playground was only 20 feet by 20 feet, with 1 tree. I couldn't see how he could have made a woman and an owl out of what was there. This teacher's statement stopped my breath. She said, "I have a friend who is a shaman. We should have him come." So I told her what I had told the doctor, that he cries and screams and writhes on the ground about a thing pinching him. But that wasn't everything. One time I was cooking in the kitchen, and he toddles in to say, "Mommy, there's a boy and a girl in my room, and they want to play." Thank God my husband had just come home and heard him say that too. We both gave each other that look and said, "Tell them they can't play with you, and to go back home."
Another time, he ran into the house with his older sister, and I closed the back door porch door as fast as I could. A mummy message, "You're done being outside." But I screamed so loudly my husband reacted. In the glass of the door I saw the bottom half of a little boy in shorts coming in after them. To me it felt like I had just slammed glass into a child, and it startled me. Scared me. My son just said, he didn't come in. The worst, though, was the skeleton man. My son told me there was a tall, skinny old man with a skull face who would come to his bed and try to take him. He said that when he came down the hall and left with all the other ghosts through his window like a stream. I swear to you, my kids have never seen Poltergeist, but that's exactly what it sounded like. And with that, I finally agreed to allow the teacher to call her shaman friend. My husband, who's never had paranormal interests, is actually one of the only persons I know to have seen a full-body apparition with another witness, so I shouldn't have been surprised that he agreed to the plan. My only condition was that the teacher had to come too. If shit happened to my son, that was going to be on her, like she'd have to witness what she'd invited. That day I cleaned and cleaned. I remember so consciously being like, how do you welcome a shaman? I literally sent my husband out for cookies since I'd spent so much time cleaning. I had to keep my son in a good space, so that means for just now 3-year-old painting and doing Play-Doh all morning. There he is, happy at the kitchen table painting, when all of a sudden he did that screaming thing and curled up on the ground saying Bumble was pinching him. In that moment, the doorbell rang. It was the shaman. I remember even now, do I leave my son alone defenseless to get the door even though it's to get help? I had to open the door. The most elegant, self-assured Native American man saluted me, introduced himself and asked to be invited in. And then with that, walked straight past me to my son. He held him at arm's length, back to standing, told him his name and said, I'm here to help you get rid of the monsters. Is there a monster here now? My son nodded, held up his arm and pointed to just the left of him. Then the shaman said, Can you show me where else they are? And my son nodded. They left our kitchen hand in hand, and like that my son took the shaman to each spot of every tantrum my son had had. At the end, the shaman turned to me and asked if he'd seen all the rooms. I was showing him the garage when my husband and oldest daughter returned, and we did the greeting thing. The preschool teacher had been holding our infant daughter whilst I'd been watching everything else. And again, I had asked, had I shown the shaman every room? There was still the basement, so we went down the porch stairs, a little happy group of kids following in this heroic figure. But a bad feeling came over me, the kind of feeling you get when you're about to walk down a street you shouldn't. The shaman told me he was going to take my son all around the house, and we are going to offer corn and tobacco, and then do a ritual on him.
So I watched from about 15 feet away as he smudged my son, handed him a crystal, and again smudged him. He then said to my son, Little man, what did you do with the crystal? I hadn't seen my son move at all during that quick turn, but the shaman just gave him another crystal and proceeded. At last that part was over, and the shaman said, I must go take care of your basement. He was in there about 5 minutes, and then called out to the preschool teacher to bring him more sage. When he emerged, he said, I think it is gone, but you must keep all your doors and windows open for many hours, and then close it before bed. We did as we were told, and went out for the evening, came home and closed everything up. Well, you can probably guess about what time at night noises started coming out of the basement. The basement was a full woodworker's paradise with cabinets and vices and shelves. I tell you, it sounded like every door and shelf was being slammed open and closed. It was terrifying to lie in bed in the middle of the night to hear just anger being exuded. I texted the shaman first thing in the morning, and he told me to just hold tight another night and to make sure I hadn't locked a raccoon or cat in who might have wandered in when we were told to leave the doors open. And above all else, I was not to go into that basement without a man who loved me. Again, the next night it happened. This time my husband and I were in different rooms, sleeping. I remember being too scared to see if he was awake, but finally he said, Hey, I hear it again. Then it stopped the next night, and in that evening we heard a cat cry from down there. My husband can't walk well, so I went and got some neighbors, big burly men, to come into the basement with me under the pretense that I thought we had a raccoon stuck in there. They loved the idea and emerged at my front door with bats, flashlights, and I think a crowbar. The three of us entered, and we heard some rustling in the far back area, where it's only about 3 feet high. I stayed right next to the door to the outside because we are neighbors, but love each other neighbors as the shaman ordered? Not so much. I kept asking them what they were seeing as they got down and were trying to see it with their flashlight. The younger one said, I shit you not, What the hell is that thing? It's too big to be a raccoon and it's walking on just its hind legs. I was so utterly terrified. I remember just being so grateful it was slightly evening light out, and all of a sudden a cat comes running at me from that back area and leaps into my arms. The poor thing was terrified and emaciated. I walked straight outside and just let it go. The men were baffled because they hadn't seen a cat, but they just coolly said their work was done and left. Then other weird things started happening that week. My son kept saying the cat raccoon was following us around the neighborhood and all the trees. And one day I couldn't find a binky to save my life. And when I returned later that day, there was a binky on top of the remote control next to the phone and one on my bed pillow. I was more than freaked at that point and called the shaman. He told me the following, that the day he was leaving for our house, his brother showed up to his house and told him whatever he was going to face was bad and to bring abuela and tia, their grandma and aunt who had passed, for protection.
He also told him for weeks that he'd been having dreams about a being attacking his own children, but then one day had a vision that was actually the shaman, his brother, fighting a being that was tormenting a little blonde boy, and wished his brother luck. He also said that cleansing our house that first night, his house had ended up being visited by a violent wind that knocked his hat off the hook and sent it flying around his room. The worst part for me to hear was that when he walked up to our house, it looked so warm, but then he rang our doorbell. He saw something not of this world run past me and into the kitchen. He told me the binkies were probably his aunt and grandma still hanging around to look out for me, and of course they love babies and mums, so it sounded like them. And then there was that crystal. Remember how I told you I spent that whole morning cleaning? Well, I'd forgotten to clean the backyard, and to my horror when we went out there to do the ceremony, I saw a dirty soaked diaper sitting in the middle of the yard that I'm sure my son had just discarded there, probably doing some type of water play, and I'd missed it. Well, I remember about 3 days after the cat, I just wanted to sit outside in our yard, and that diaper was still there. I picked it up, and underneath it was a beautiful clear and purple quartz crystal. I didn't need to call the shaman. I knew who had put it there. About a year later, I was down in the basement alone, getting a box of old clothes for my much bigger baby to wear. On top of the plastic bins was a small leather satchel with a turtle on it that I didn't recognise. But I figured it was maybe the shaman's and he'd left it behind battling that thing. So I called him and asked. Turned out it was his, so we had another excuse for him to come and make a trip to visit. My son still talks about him almost 4 years later now, so imagine seeing his hero again and how he ran to him. He said the satchel was extra protection and a gift from his mentor shaman, and I said I don't think it was an accident I found it right where I was headed. And then he told me the story of the battle in our basement, which he'd held back telling me in those first few weeks because he said it was too scary. He said that when he challenged the thing to leave, his sage burst into a spike of flames and was incinerated. Now that ain't how sage burns, people. He said he took it as just an intimidation tactic, and felt he had been given the message to get out, and probably those first nights of banging was just its angry protest. He also mentioned that when he had given my son the first crystal, he'd felt something jump onto his back, and was sure it had knocked the crystal out of my son's hand. We still live here, and I still sage. You'd better believe I sage when things feel funny. But my son's never seen anything since. Well, nothing he's scared of.
And that is the curious case of Bumblebuzz. I think this is the first time you and I have told this together, right, Paul?
Yes, certainly is.
Fantastic. Well, I'm glad I saved it for this episode. I think thick Russell Crowe deserves the curious case of Bumblebuzz. So I'm just curious, before we wrap up, what do you think of that one?
I find it very interesting that you bring someone in from the outside who doesn't know the specifics of exactly what's happening and is then able to have a son who has apparently been having tantrums and allegedly misbehaving, warmly accept him immediately and quite happily take him around the house to where everything is. Now, I'm sure people may say, well, maybe he was just being a toddler and whatever. But for him to then positively react and his whole personality and behaviour change after that visit speaks volumes, I think, for the work that the shaman had done.
When people ask me, what's some of the really memorable stories from the show? And again, I've been doing this for seven years now. So, I mean, stuff fades, right? Like I've told probably hundreds of stories on the show by this point. And I mean, I try to remember as many as I can. And of course I have as many of the scripts as there were scripts. So, 100 and some scripts. So I can always go find things. But when someone asks me, like, what's one that really stuck with you? This is always the one that comes to mind first. It just is so singular. And again, coming from an educator, coming from someone who knows kids, I don't think this is someone who jumps to conclusions. Just fascinating stuff. And chilling as shit. Like, because there's a real, shape-shifting kind of nature spirit thing going on.
Yes. And also features that rarely spotted father who doesn't think everybody else has gone daft.
That is true. I hadn't thought about that, but that is an exception to a pretty firm rule.
Yes. Stoic and quiet, but not unbelieving.
That is something to aim for, gentlemen.
More dads should be like that dad.
You don't even have to be stoic and quiet. Just believe people when they tell you shit.
Especially people you apparently love.
Yeah, exactly.
I love you very much, but no, I'm not having any of this nonsense. No.
Yeah, I love you, but not enough to listen to you.
I'm going to have to get some more laudanum for you if you carry on.
I listened to a book recently on the Stoics, and boy, what a bunch of boring bullshit. I was researching something for Weird Together. We did an episode on Blackout, the Larry Fessenden werewolf movie. I referred to a character as being stoic, and I thought, geez, I actually don't know if I'm using that word correctly. So I did a little looking around, and I got into this sort of rabbit hole about the Stoic movement, and I thought, okay, well, there's a book that's free on Audible. I'll give it a listen. I wasn't looking for a new philosophy, but I thought I'm curious to know what this is all about. And it's horseshit. That's what it's about.
It's the passion that makes us alive.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm with you. I mean, I'm not was it Epicurean? I'm not that. I'm just, I'm a Jim Steinmanian. I am the man who wrote Bat Out of Hell, I think, nicely represents my take on the world. It's high, it's low. It's high, it's low. It's screaming in the night, sometimes for no reason, but it's fun and hopefully memorable.
Brilliant.
It gets up to trouble in cars.
Say that and I know exactly which song you're talking about.
All right, well, that is the end of Dial E for Exorcist. Don't forget to check out The Exorcism. It is in theaters everywhere now. Again, we're not saying it's good. We're just saying it's fun.
Is that an endorsement or something?
No, I did not agree to endorse it. I just said we would talk about it.
Okay, good.
Oh boy. As if we hadn't already pissed them off enough.
I'm too old for another exorcism.
Some things you can't fix.
My middle name protects me. I'm fine.
Now that I believe. All right, we are going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with our Ghost Force shoutouts. Hey there, listeners. Before you reach for that skip 15 seconds ahead button, I promise you this isn't an ad. We wanted to take a minute to talk to you about mental health. On this show, I've always tried to be as honest and open as possible about my struggles with depression and anxiety, because even though we've come a long way towards acknowledging the very real damage these things can do, there is still way too much lingering stigma about reaching out for help. And when you start to feel like there's no help, it's easy to start feeling like there's no hope. But Paul has joined me today to remind you there is always hope and there's always help.
We're not going to try and talk you out of self-harming right now, because we know that's not how it works. Instead, what we wanted to do was tell you something now and hope that should things get bad, you'll remember it and make a phone call or send a text message before you make any permanent decisions. As someone who knows all too well just how important mental health can be, it's never too late to reach out.
In Canada, the number to call is 133-456-4566. In the USA, the new number to call is 988. That's 988.
In the UK, the number to call is 116123 or text SHOUT, that's SHOUT, to 85258. In Australia, the number to call is 131114.
However bad shit seems, it will pass. And no matter what your brain might be telling you at any given moment, and believe me when I say I know this intimately, there are people who love you and people who care deeply about how you treat yourself. Should a time come when you find yourself despairing, please know that we've both been where you are, and there is a way back to the world. Take care. Welcome back. The Ghost Story Guys are Luke Greensmith, who helps find our stories. He's also host of the Luke Lore podcast. Brody Daniels, who now also helps us find our stories. Tanya Downing, who manages our Facebook community. She is also co-host of the podcast Streaming into Madness with Walter Whitaker. Joseph Camo, who helps manage our YouTube account. He is also host of the Sociology Professor YouTube channel. Adam Lynch, who edits our video. He is host of Weekly Creep with Dulce. Sarah Kent, who manages our Reddit community.
Our high priest of the paranormal is Mr. Brennan Storr.
And of course, my friend and co-host is the one, the only, the inimitable Paul Bestel, the paranormal Johnny Carson himself, host of Mysteries and Monsters. Paul, what's coming up on M&M?
I'm taking a trip to Wisconsin with Jeff Feinup as we dive into some Wisconsin legends and lore before I return to ufology in the marvellous company of Charles Lear as we dive into some rather unusual characters and we spend rather too much time talking about that secret lizard base under Dulce Airport.
Oh, fantastic. And where can everyone find you online?
You can find Mysteries and Monsters across all social media and podcast platforms.
Fabulous. I'm largely the truth on Threads, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd. And you can find my other show, Weird Together, which is an exploration of the sociology behind some of the best new horror films everywhere fine podcasts live. That is, of course, co-hosted with Dr. Joseph Camo. As we said at the top of the show, we couldn't do this without our patrons, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube subscribers. So thanks to every single one of you guys. And of course, if you support what we do, you get not only the satisfaction of knowing that this crazy, crazy train continues at your behest, but you get access to bonus conversations between me and Paul, episodes of Host Adventures, which is sort of like a trip through what's going on with me. You get articles about spooky places read to you by yours truly, our monthly live shows, and so much more. Rewards start, at least on Patreon, at $1 a month, and you can get that over at patreon.com/ghoststoryguides. That's patreon.com/ghoststoryguides, or by signing up to GSG Premium via Apple Podcasts and YouTube. And of course, if you support the show at the $20 level and above, that makes you part of an elite club. It's a little something we like to call Ghost Force. That's right, only the coolest of the cool are in Ghost Force. You, me, about 30 other people, and thick Russell Crowe, who's a little behind on his dues, but we'll give him a pass for now. That was Paul agreeing. He has lost the power of thought.
That was me on Monday morning.
That is me right now. I am melting in real time. We are abandoned by God, and I am on the surface of the sun, alone and on fire.
Good times.
Before my skeleton collapses into a puddle of my own sweat, we would like to thank the members of Ghost Force. They are
Ethan Saragon.
Big Titty Kitty,
Bran wears a pink tutu.
Cackling Skull,
Crazy Mum.
CT,
Flowy Two Heads.
Generic Bob,
Hannah Brown.
Hannah Stevens,
Hillary
Jade Moores,
Gianni Banani.
Johnny Bananani,
Gianna Bananani.
Johnny Bananani.
Gianna Bananani.
I forget whose turn it is now, Paul.
You.
Thank you, Jason R. Slaughter.
Jennifer Mullen.
Joseph Camo,
Kimberly Hansen.
Malevolent Clamato,
Mara Noriega.
Mark Sembler,
Megan Rocket.
Merlin Hansen.
Name.
Name? That's new. Okay, name. You got it.
Name.
Maybe Name.
Name.
Anyways, name.
Name.
Whatever. You pay me $20, I'll call you whatever the fuck you want.
Name.
Name it is.
Name.
Or that. If we're getting this wrong, please write in and tell us. Nicola.
Peter Gunn 08.5.
Rebecca Brink.
Robin Teen.
Ruckin' Runny Shenanigans.
Shannon Steyer.
Stefan Schwarzwald.
Trent Cannon.
You are the few. You are the spooky. You are Ghost Force. For real, guys, thank you so much. We cannot tell you how much we appreciate all our patrons, but members of Ghost Force, you are truly crazy, and we love you for it. So thank you all for your generous support. And if you would like to have your name read out, like I said, I will say almost anything. So will Paul. Almost. There are exceptions. I can't imagine what they are, and let's not explore that right now. But still, if you would like to have your name read out in that segment, sign up to Ghost Force at either patreon.com/ghoststoryguys or via YouTube. Unfortunately, we're not able to offer Ghost Force via Apple Podcasts just yet, but you can sign up on Patreon or on YouTube.
Or via Ouija board.
I mean, we can try. I'm real bad at checking the messages we already get, but we can certainly try Ouija board.
I can use my new one.
Why is it you have a new Ouija board?
I saw it in a garage sale. I thought, yeah, that looks good.
Fair. Hey, I can't argue with that.
Ironically, I bought it off Matt Bellamy from Muse's stepsister.
Really?
Yes, I didn't realise she lived round the corner from me.
How did that come up?
She used to drink in Washington when I ran it, so I knew who she was because she fetched them in once.
Oh, okay. And you just happened to see her having a yard sale.
She was. We have fairly regular ones in our area, so there's quite a few miniature celebrities lurking in our streets, in the mean streets of Meersbrook.
Shout out to our composer, Rainy Days for Ghosts. Rainy Days for Ghosts is a project of film journalist and composer Harper Smith. Find more of Harper's work at rainydaysforghosts.bandcamp.com or by searching for Rainy Days for Ghosts and Street Witch everywhere you stream your music. Our theme song, Radio, Into the Darkness We Go, is composed and performed by Peter Kursov of Pizzanta Music. Find more from him by searching for Pizzanta Music wherever you get your tunes. And I guess that's going to do it.
We'll be back next week, but until then...
Into the darkness we go. Yeah, I have no idea.
I'm not a saddo.
If I disappear from the camera for a prolonged period of time, call 911.
Okay.
Good Lord.
What's your safe word?
I can't remember the last time I sweat so much. I'm going to have to burn all my sheets after this. Washing won't be enough. Afterwards became a constant obstacle. That afterwards became a constant obstacle. I can make words. I'm a Pepsi man, so we're going to have to fight.
Fucking shit.
Tell me how you really feel.
It's another strange brotherly thing that my brother drinks Pepsi and won't drink Coke.
Oh, really? Mm. He's a man of taste and distinction.
Yeah, he's got to get over himself, you know?
Don't listen to him, Dean.
Wears Nike rather than Adidas, drinks Pepsi instead of Coca-Cola, gets married and instead of running away from himself for his life. I mean, what's wrong with him? These are the eggs of Christ.
Oh, there's an image. Don't want to dwell on that.
He's doing what down the chimney? What? Get him down. Shoot him if you have to. Just get him off the roof.
That's why all your boys' trips you have tranquilizer darts.
We have to.